Okay, yes. Hi, this is Suzan McDowell, President and CEO of Circle of One Marketing. Welcome to yet another episode of In the Circle with Suzan. It has been a long, hot summer, and I have been very hot. I'm sure the rest of the world is hot. I would just like to point out that if we had listened to Al Gore in 2000, 24 years later, we would not be this hot. Anyway, I would also like to point out that my guest that I'm about to introduce you to is one of our favorite people at Circle of One. She's one of our favorite clients and my friend. And I said to her, she's like, what should I wear? I'm like, absolutely do not wear a print. Wear something solid. Because that's what I hear all the smart TV people say. And then guess what? I showed up and didn't really think about it because, Anyway, I'm apologizing now on camera while I introduce you to our very fabulous client, the beautiful and talented Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, who is a cultural architect and a equity strategist. So, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Suzanne. And you look wonderful in your jungle print, and it looks great on you.
Thank you. I'm just very embarrassed because I made a whole thing. You cannot wear prints because it is going to be, and yet here I am.
I had this lovely summer dress that I was going to wear. It was definitely a lot of print, but
and would it have matched with this?
We would have clashed. We would have definitely clashed. So
we don't want to clash.
Yeah.
Well, I also would like to say that this jumpsuit is a mixed by Nazarene jumpsuit. And Nazarene is this beautiful, woman from New York, this beautiful Asian lady who had come up with these outfits. This is my new uniform. So mixed by Nazarene. I appreciate you. I'm just giving her a shout out for no reason. Anyway, Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, welcome to In the Circle with Suzanne. We have something, we start this interview with your story. So I will start like I normally do. I was born, and then what happened?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska.
What? Omaha,
Nebraska, of all places, in the early 70s. And I have always been the middle child, regardless as to how many children my parents had. I was always the middle.
How many kids did your parents have?
There were 5 total.
And you were 3?
I'm always in the middle. Yes.
Forever.
Forever in the middle. And so middle child, growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, very interesting place for Black folks to grow up in. But it was amazing for me. Very interesting mix of opportunity and complexity. A lot of segregation.
Segregation in the 70s?
Segregation in the 70s. So
tell me about your parents.
My parents, my mother worked for the public school system as a custodian, and so she was very close. No messing up in school on her watch because
she was watching you.
She wasn't watching me, but she had eyes everywhere. Yes. And so if you didn't show up in school, someone knew about it. She definitely knew about it, right? And my father was an electrician for Kellogg Cereal Company.
What?
Yes.
An electrician for Kellogg's?
Yes, for Kellogg's.
Does he know Tony the Tiger?
He knew Tony the Tiger. It was really amazing because
when the Frosted Flakes became a thing.
When Frosted Flakes became a thing, it was a staple in our house. All Kellogg cereal, only Kellogg cereal in our house.
I have it in my refrigerator.
Yes. And also my grandfather, my father's father, was a USDA beef inspector. What? And so Kellogg cereal and beef was our thing.
Jam.
Yes, it was our jam. And
so definitely a carnivore.
Definitely, even still to this day. Yes, of
course.
And so,
so your dad was a Kellogg's engineer. Like, what does that even entail? What's a Kellogg's engineer?
He fixed all of the conveyor belts that made the cereals. That made the cereals, right?
So then the cereals were going along, and then they were like,
yeah.
And then your dad would come in, and then gotcha.
And things that didn't work, and they would fix them. And we often got to see Tony the Tiger. They would have events. And, my dad was also part of a union.
Oh, my God. That's a union vote. That's like a powerful block.
Yeah. And so we were a union family. Didn't understand exactly what that meant. But, definitely great wages, great working conditions, and we lived a pretty stable middle class life.
So do you feel like that your parents and your beginnings kind of contributed to the person that you are? Like, the fact that you're grounded in this kind of cultural, examination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all started there. I mean, there's this very interesting thing too about Nebraska, it's one of the places where they split the electoral vote.
Oh no.
Yeah.
What happened?
And so, in the place where most of the Black people or the people of color lived, during that time, they often voted differently, where the majority at that time of where white folks lived, and it was almost the opposite. So it was very politicized. Early on, we had Ernie Chambers,
oh wow,
who was very active politically and encouraged members from our community to be very active politically earlier on. And so
and that's how you got into this. That's how you got there. You got naturally.
Yeah, it was this. It was a part of who we were. It was part of our, our conversations, a part of working, working conditions. My mother worked for the public school system. And so even as a custodian, making sure that she had, a pension and livable wages,
all those things,
and all of those things that absolutely mattered for work and for living and providing for a family. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting. One of the themes that we talk about on this show is this kind of layering of our past. And I interviewed the mayor, and the mayor was, the mayor who's awesome mayor of Miami-Dade County. She's a social worker. Yeah. She had this beautiful, lovely childhood, not really a lot to complain about other than a divorce, which I understand, but it's not her fault. But other than that, really good life. And her father was from that service. He was her father, and her mother had brought her up in politics. So here we are all these years later, and it's in her bones. And we've had this conversation with a number of people. And this always happens. Yeah. And so I ask, and then it always comes back down to your foundation is you're doing exactly what your parents set you up to do.
Yeah, I think so, which is why parenting matters.
Which is why parenting matters.
I take my parenting very seriously as well. Don't always get it right, for sure.
Please,
I know. Being a parent is tough.
Being a parent is rough.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I'm like...
And so planting some of those early seeds and then experimenting. I was bused for high school, like 22 miles away from my house.
So you're one of those bus kids.
I was one of those
Were you a latchkey kid?
I was a latchkey kid, although my mother's work schedule allowed her to be home.
Yeah, you guys were at the same time.
Closer to
the most part.
So she left early in the morning. So we got ourselves out to school, but she was home shortly after or before.
Gotcha.
We got home. So pretty latchkey, and we did after school activities, but I was bused out.
So were you the only Black kid in a white school?
I was a few.
One of like how many percentage?
Few. We went to all white school, and I would say maybe 10%.
10%. 1 out of 10.
Yeah,
a lot of smiling.
Yeah, a lot of smiling.
A lot of smiling.
We had race riots.
Race riots
we had race riots in our school in the late 80s,
Did you have
early 90s.
Were you like,
no, I mean it wasn't like we experienced of late, but the kids who were bused were the kids of color, mostly Black children from the north side of Omaha. They were bused out to the west side of the city. We would be in the auditorium, for example, because someone would say something or someone would do something. That someone would typically be like an administrator or a teacher with cuff remarks, or some students like really out of control we would get upset
because you had a right to.
about the conditions or the experiences, and just a sit-in, if you will, in the
but that's great
in the auditorium, and
just for the civics of it.
And so those experiences early on in high school, and I knew then that I was like, for college I want to do something different, not a all white predominant.
So where'd you go to school again?
I ended up going to Norfolk State, a black college, small HBCU, like right out of high school. And
where'd you study?
I studied.
By the way, I know all of this. It's all in her bio, but go ahead.
I studied finance, right out of school, because in high school, I had enough credits to graduate in the 11th grade.
Oh, voila.
But my mother was like, "You are not leaving here yet."
Like,
and so I joined the Future Business Leaders of America program and went to school for a half a day in the 12th grade. And I worked at the First National Bank the second half of the day to fill up my day so I wouldn't get myself into any trouble.
Girl. I worked at HEB, the grocery store. My mom was like, "Oh yeah, right after school, no trouble."
And so I used to work in this very interesting department, coding.
You were coding?
I was coding in high school. Coding? I was coding in high school to
so in the 90s.
In the early 90s. To make unique credit card numbers. And
I'm sorry, what?
Unique credit card numbers. So to make credit card numbers for...
It's amazing to me, these things that are actual jobs.
Yeah, they're actual jobs.
Like a Kellogg engineer.
Like a black job, right?
Like a black job. Yeah. That was a black job.
Yeah. And so it was interesting, though, because in the 20 hours a week that I worked, the 5 hours a day that I needed to fill up my school day, my first intro into, it wasn't called financial services then, but finance, I actually made more money in that 20 hours a week than my mother made in 2 weeks of her paycheck.
No way.
Yeah.
My mom was a teacher too. I remember and you really, when you think about it, I don't understand how we still having this conversation about how teachers are paid so little. Like your mom, somebody that's got it's a big responsibility.
And my mother wasn't a teacher. My mother was a custodial staff, right?
It's a big responsibility.
And so even less than what teachers made.
Yeah. It was less than what teachers, which is nothing.
But she had a very significant role, right, in all of the children that she interacted with every day, right? And
people
they came to her for counseling if they forgot their. She used to bring suitcases of things to school for young women who forgot their supplies that they needed, kids who, things that we have outgrown or we didn't pay attention to anymore, would share with other students. Like she had relationships. It's like, oh, I remember your mom. We used to hang out with her.
Your mom was doing it.
In her office, which used to be the laundry room. So it was great. But, all that to say, very different, experiences and very different opportunities based on the schools that you want to, the exposure, that I had, and some very early intros into a business and finance, and started off.
So when you left Norfolk State, did you go straight to Matt? Tell me what happened after Norfolk.
I actually didn't finish up at Norfolk State. I transferred because I got married.
Word.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I forget you got married at 19.
I did get married.
What the hell?
I don't know what I was thinking.
Who gets married at 19? I couldn't even spell my name by 19. I was like, what?
I did get married at 19.
What?
I had this interesting life goal,
that you wanted to have all these kids?
That I wanted to be married and have children.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There is nothing wrong with that. But, I probably should have waited a little while longer, but I did not. I did it.
And you have 4 beautiful kids.
I do have 4 beautiful kids. Yeah. So I got married. I got married at 19. Had my first daughter at 20. She's now 31.
God, how do you have a 31-year-old daughter?
I know.
Stop the madness.
Yeah. And I had my second one like 3 years later. So I have a 28-year-old. Wow. And I took a 21-year break.
A 21-year break.
Because
so in addition to your 31-year-old and your 27-year-old? 28-year-old, you have a pair.
I have a pair.
Of 6-year-olds.
I have a pair. They're almost 7.
They're almost 7.
They will be 7 in 2 weeks.
Yes. Sage and Sherman.
Twins,
Sage and Sherman. They're super serious, little beautiful children that have a lot of locks, but
they are super serious. They have 10 less locks.
They have 10 less locks.
Since they cut each other's hair last night.
They did that kid foolishness. I think I'm going to cut off all my hair.
Yes.
So I know we all did that. So, okay. So I understand. I mean, I know because you've been our client for 4 years that just what an involved mother you are and what an involved in all your kids. And you have 2 separate sets of kids. 21-year gap. You know what I mean? In the course, and then you're living your life in the course of all those years.
All of the years.
You know what I mean? So I just think it's great. I think it's great. And I've seen how you are with your kids. So they've won the mommy lotto. So I understand. And I feel like my daughter won the mommy lotto too, because I'm a lot of fun and I'm smart and I was really nice to her for a lot of years. And hey, I got her. I kept her off the pole. I feel like that's my goal. Isn't that what Chris Rock said? Keep them off the pole.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so then tell us. So then you fast forwarded.
Yeah, fast forward. So I did finish, but I transferred with my then husband to Arkansas, and I finished up at the University of Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
And then I went on to get my MBA and then my PhD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, while I was very excited and my goal has always been to be married and to have children, I needed to provide for them.
And keep your mind.
And to keep my mind
occupied with academic issues,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, this intellectual stimulation and curiosity. I mean, someone had asked me before. I tell you, the seed was planted. I was working on my MBA. I had my then youngest with me, my second son, and I was transitioning from work because I would go to work at 7 in the morning so I can be off by 3 o'clock so I can get to Rutgers University because I was taking MBA courses, and my mother was supporting, she was with us and she was supporting me with childcare.
And you're like in your 20s.
I'm in my 20s.
With your PhD and your...
No, I was working on my MBA at this time. I was working on my
and
MBA
your husband
at this time.
And 2 kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so my mother was working at a state hospital in New Jersey. I was going to Rutgers nearby, so she would collect my son, who I think he must have been 4 at the time from daycare,
and let you go do your thing.
Yeah, and so I would go to school in the evening from 6 to 9 o'clock. To take these MBA courses. And I was sitting at a bus stop with my son. There was a woman who was a faculty member. She would walk by as she was on her way to class or leaving class. And she would see us there every day because I went Monday through Thursday. And she said, I see you here with this precious boy every day. And I was like, yep, waiting on grandma to pick him up. And she said, he can go to college here for free if you get a PhD.
No. And you were like, you're like, newsflash.
Newsflash.
Mind blown.
Right? I loved school. I loved learning, right? I had always been I had already committed to lifelong learning by this point. And I'm in my 20s.
Yeah. You have time.
Right? Living paycheck to paycheck at this time, right?
Free.
Hadn't done a lot of savings towards the kids' college. And I was like,
Good
I'm going to get a PhD to make sure these kids go to college.
You got a PhD to make your kids go to college?
I got a PhD to ensure that my kids can go to college. Yeah.
Rutgers.
Yeah.
Well,
and so.
That is awesome. Yeah. We are going to skip to the conversation that we were having earlier. So.
Let's do that.
So, okay, so 3 things I want to talk about. So we got a few minutes to talk about all these.
Okay.
So, DE&I. So you are a cultural architect and an equity strategist.
Yes.
Which we know, as your marketing agency, you don't really love that title. You don't love that space. But what you don't love the DE&I label that goes with that. So, but what it, like, tell me, because you understand this space. So what exactly is DEI, and why is it a bad word in a lot of places?
In its simplest term, I mean, it has been co-opted. To mean so many things that it's not. I mean, in recent times, it's didn't even earn it. I think within the last several weeks, it's meant Don, Junior, Eric, and Ivanka. But in its basic forms, it is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
So why are people mad at that?
Well, let me just say, diversity is the social identities that make up who we are, our race, our gender, our class, and so many more elements that sort of define how people define us. Equity is ensuring that we have, or that everyone has, the things that they need in order to be successful and or to thrive, taking into account all of the differences, like the different places where people start and their different needs. And inclusion is ensuring that everyone has a voice and that they can bring their full selves, right? Put them all together, you get diversity, equity, and inclusion. And everyone has benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Way beyond the Black community.
Way beyond what people have assumed that it's just for Black people or it's just for people who are disadvantaged, right?
Or not as smart.
Or not as smart.
Not as deserving.
Or not as deserving or not as able. We have our 40-hour work week that had come because we needed some boundaries so more people can participate. There was a time where there were programs or initiatives to fast track people into leadership. And at that time, it was just people in leadership were just white men, right?
Yeah.
There was no problem
but that
with
was their
that.
diversity.
That was
We're
their
going to have a whole bunch of different kinds of white men.
Different types of white men, right?
Have short white men, tall white men.
Right, yeah. Flexible work arrangements, telecommuting, different benefits for health insurance. All of those things come from ensuring that people have what they need in order to thrive and to be successful.
Got it. And is that the inclusion part?
That's the equity piece. The inclusion piece is making sure that people are at the table, right? There was a time, affirmative action, bringing men, Black men into the fold. White women had the watershed effect. The biggest benefit from affirmative action.
The biggest benefit from affirmative action is white women.
It's white women. Right?
Let's say that again. The biggest beneficiary from affirmative action is white women.
Right.
Hands down.
Hands down. Evidence that in my dissertation, by the way.
Yes, you did.
And
Your
so,
brain is bigger than the rest of us.
Yes. And so, only to say now that we don't want to we need to stop it or changing the results on it. So anyway, you have to make investments in the places that need the greatest investments in order to continue to have growth. I mean, that's this basic investment 101. Right. That's how you grow. That's how markets work. That's how life works. If you see something, that's how we continue to grow. Right. We've been talking about for 25 years that the demographic shift is going to change. If you only continue,
and now it's here.
It's
here.
Been here.
It's been here.
It's been here.
We were talking earlier about the Olympics, and so now here we are to your demographic shift. So now here we are to the Olympics, and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Yay, America!
Yay, America!
Simone Biles! Yay, Kevin Durant! Yay, Steph Curry! Yay, LeBron James! And even yay, the girl that's beside Simone Biles, and then Katie Ledecky, and and all of these people make up the mosaic of America. So why are people able to accept diversity in the Olympics? And they're not able to accept it.
Yeah,
in America.
I would go a little further and say people are celebrating the number of medals that we have won,
voila.
right?
Yeah, we're bigger.
And the number of the U.S. has received the greatest number of medals than any other country. And the reason why is because of the diversity of the athletes on this major stage.
There
right?
you go.
Like, that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
Right? And when we look at the bottom line of organizations, the one that has the greatest returns, the one that has the greatest impact,
are the ones that are diverse.
are the ones that are the most diverse, the ones who have the most medals, right? Those are the ones that's winning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's studies after studies after studies that demonstrate the fact that when you have the most social identities, the most of the D's, the most diversity, when you provide when you ensure that people have what they need in order to thrive and to be successful, whether that's flexible work arrangements, equitable pay, different opportunities to work, and when you have environments where people feel valued, respected, and that they belong, you have greater outcomes.
Yeah, people are happier.
Yes.
And that's the other thing.
And they do their very best.
They do
work.
their best. So the belonging word, I obviously work with One United, and we did a whole thing this year about, love, one love. What is love? And one of the things we discovered from BME, the BME organization, and some of the scholars that are attached to that organization, is that what people really want is belonging.
That's right.
It's the B. It's DENI, but then there's a B.
Yes.
I just want to belong.
Everybody wants to belong.
I just want to belong.
Everybody wants to belong.
I don't want you to other me all the time.
Yes. Everyone has an experience of being on the outside.
Yeah.
Nobody likes it.
Nobody wants to be on the outside.
Nobody wants to be othered. And that's why when something as ridiculous as the ridiculous comes, people attach and say, well, oh yeah, this is a place for me. They hear me, they see me.
I mean, that's also, the phenomenon, the MAGA phenomenon. Those people feel like they belong. Like that's their belonging.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon.
That's its own phenomenon.
For MAGA and for anyone else.
And for us, yeah.
When we see representation, when we investigate and do our research on a company, right? And we look at their leadership team, and it's full of women who look like us. When their products represent,
they're like crack-a-lackin'.
Yes, when
they're crack-a-lackin'.
Yes, when their products represent stuff that we would buy, that we would put in our house. You're like, I want to buy more. I want to buy more. I want to see more.
Music, sports, business, stop. I want to be like, this is how you
that's
win.
Why representation
diversity
matters,
is how you win.
Right?
It's how you win.
Right. And so
that's what we think.
That's it matters.
Yes.
It matters. Yes.
And it matters so much. And now we've been hearing, the diversity, the whole world's going to shift. It's becoming browner. And it just is. It's America.
It just is.
But it feels like now that we have this, this new decision, that with our new candidate,
let's call it what it is: the transfer of power.
The transfer of power. But that's hard to imagine, considering all these years. You do get othered. So then, how did we get to the point where there is actually a conversation that there is now about to be a transfer of power? And I'm not talking about presidential power. I'm talking about, mass consciousness. Girl, you got 1 minute to talk about it.
Yes.
We're going to go 5 minutes later, okay? Mr. Alex, thank you.
Yeah,
Is that okay? Yay, Alex.
I mean, it fully represents the shifts that have been happening. It just names it, right? And it names it and it operationalizes it as well.
Operationalizes it.
Like we have been saying that you have to give up something. Like people have to actually be willing to give up something. It's more than just money, right?
Like a little bit of privilege.
It's a lot of bit of privilege.
But I don't think, who's going to give up privilege? I'm just saying, as a human being, there's a privilege to being pretty. I don't want to give up my privilege. So I'm just saying, privilege, like they said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Privilege.
Yeah.
A human being will never want to give up their privilege.
People who really care about humanity.
They may give up their privilege.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Or it may have to get taken from
right. And I think power. I think pretty is a little different than power.
No, pretty's a little different. That's what I mean is like the privilege of
the privilege of running the country,
the privilege of being tall, the privilege of being an American, the privilege of having a good vocabulary. It's all privilege.
Yeah, it is all privilege. But the privilege of making all of the decisions, the privilege of allowing other people to make decisions, the privilege
who gets to decide,
the privilege of allowing other people to the table with decision-making power to have an impact, right? The privilege to decide how much is enough for me and giving the rest to others for the greater good.
So isn't that socialism? Sorry.
Yeah, it is. Yes, in its in its technical form, right? It's socialism in its technical form, but I'm not talking about socialism.
We're talking about equity.
I'm talking about equity
and power.
I'm talking about equity and power, right? And so I'm talking about just not sitting on it because you can.
Yes,
right? I'm talking about sharing. I'm just going to
sit on this top of it, and I'm going to watch all these people suffer. Right. And I'm going to be like, well, I have all this money. What's too bad for you? And that's how I feel, is a lot of people. And when I'm talking about privilege and all of that, it's like, well, you see all these people suffering. You have more than you can even spend. Your whole family can't spend it. Why are you holding on to the taxes?
Well, we can talk about investing. I'm not talking about giving away. I'm talking about investing.
Yes. In something else.
In something else to ensure that people have what they need to be successful.
Got it.
Right? Investing in education, investing in basic human needs for people to thrive that have been disinvested for generation and generation.
All of
right?
that. Access to funding,
right.
All of that. Think about if you have a dream somewhere, you have this great idea and you have no access to money, and so your whole idea just dies, and then you're miserable for the rest of your life. And what does that do for society? Nothing. There's nothing for society. Nobody moved forward. Nobody got to benefit from this great idea.
Or clean air, right? This is basic human, libraries, right? We
water.
have some schools. We have some schools that don't have textbooks.
How?
Because there's no investment in education,
2024. How?
Right? But we have a school next door
that has everything.
My children went to school. They had 2 sets of textbooks.
What?
They went to a public school. They had 2 sets of textbooks because someone did a study that said carrying the books can cause, in the backpack, can cause back problems. So they had a set of books at school, and they had a set of books at school.
That's pretty good.
It is pretty good.
That's pretty good.
It is really good.
That sounds like a really good plan.
It was a really good school.
It was a really good school. A really good public school.
And a really good public school. And they had a really great education, right? But it was based on the tax base of that school system. And just across the other way, there was a school system
that didn't have that tax base.
That didn't have the tax base.
They don't have the real estate. They don't have the millage rate. They don't have all the tax.
And the kids, not everyone had one set of books. Like the children were sharing.
They didn't even have
books
one set of books
in school.
One set of books.
And so there's a huge disparity in the inequity in that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, just the access to a book.
Right.
I mean, just the access
And that's
to
not
something
socialism.
that's not socialism.
Right?
That's concern. That's caring about
Right.
about the.
It's just
All of us.
investing in that's making the right investments, right? And that's a transfer of power. That's a transfer of different decision making. It's a transfer of different experiences, right? Like if your only experience has been in this school where you've had 2 sets of books.
Yeah.
And you're only talking to people who've always had 2 sets of books.
Exactly.
Right?
We would have no concept. And I think, that's exactly it. Just like a lot of people, my friend Michael Miller, who owns this newspaper, always says, like, he and I had a conversation one time and he changed his mind. He learned something from our conversation, changed his mind, and that by itself is a sea change that could change a lot of other, just because he changed his mind, because he listened, because he was open to diversity of ideas, and now his life is better.
Yeah. But if you're in a position of knowing it all, you can never be in a position of learning anything.
Yeah, you have to remain curious. We talked about that earlier. The power of curiosity.
Yeah. And if you're incurious, you get it. You don't get an opportunity to transfer anything. Right? And you're just so quick to say, "Well, that's socialism. We're not about that." No, it's people just drop words, and that's how the whole D&I got corrupted, right? And then people get on and didn't even earn it. How about you just didn't even learn it?
Now, see, that's what we were talking about. The other thing is this assumption. I'm not necessarily trying to racialize this. I'm really not. But this assumption that
everything is racialized.
It is. Everything is racialized. But the assumption that the people who are in power now, who they're not required to really come from anything. They're not required to be smart. They're not required. They don't have the same. They're not required to be curious.
No, they're not.
They don't have to be curious. They just show up and go, "Hey."
They're not.
They wake up this way.
They're not.
They're not required to care about what this other person thinks or what this other person. They don't have to.
No, they don't. And
Back
that's
to the
a privilege.
Back to the
That is a privilege. That is a privilege.
You know. So.
Whereas in my little space of growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, the consistent message, the one that I still play in my 51-year-old brain, is you have to do more. You have to be smarter. You have to run faster. You have to be curious.
But you're naturally curious. None of that would have happened if you weren't naturally curious or had a good base.
And you still have to be curious.
You still have to continue to be curious.
At some point, you can cut off being curious because you know everything.
But or you're dead.
Yes, or you're dead.
Or you're dead.
Of which I choose to be curious.
Yes, I would choose to be curious too. So I believe that curiosity keeps us all young, and I always want to know, which is why I have you here on my show, In the Circle with Suzan. So we've gone way over our time, Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown. I want you, by the way, thank you for coming from Orlando.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming from Orlando, our very own Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown. We're going to continue this conversation about the transfer of power.
Transfer of power. Check me out.
Check me out. Oh, yes. Can you tell us how we can find you, please?
You can find me at kerrymitchellbrown.com or on any social media channel at Dr. Kerry M. Brown to continue the conversation.
All right. The future is female.
The future is female.
Thank you, Dr.